Welcome back to another GP Fans special edition as we're reporting live from races throughout the 2022 season. I'm delighted to say joining myself, Ollie Wilson, is Mr. Ian Parks, boots on the ground in Saudi Arabia. There is plenty to get into after a tumultuous 24 hours for Formula One as a sport and Saudi Arabia in general. Let's have a chat, Ian, about what went down yesterday in Saudi Arabia, 11 kilometres from the track, and of course everything that happened yesterday evening as well.
Well, yeah, we were expecting incidents because this is the Jeddah Corniche circuit. And we all remember what happened at this Grand Prix weekend in December, which proved to be the penultimate weekend. Tremendous excitement on track. So we knew coming here that there was going to be excitement, but we just didn't think it was going to be of the variety that took place yesterday afternoon with a terrorist missile strike during FP1. Just unheard of in Formula One. I've never covered anything like it. I think back to my time when I was in Bahrain many years ago, covering the incidents there and what was going on. But to actually be in a place where a terrorist missile lands just 11 kilometers away from you is quite honestly frightening. And there are many here today, not just media, but we know the drivers. And certainly there'll be many people within the teams wondering, what on earth are we still doing here? But of course, we'll get onto that, Ollie, during this discussion.
I mean, that is one of the biggest questions of what are we still doing here? But firstly, how do we get to the point where Formula One is staying here? Because there were a whole host of meetings, and I feel sorry for you, even though you're obviously out at the track. But there was a long night last night for yourself, because it looked like initially, after the meeting before FP2 began and got underway, that once that was done, okay, this is what Formula One is going to do. We're going to have FP2. That likely means we're going to have the rest of the weekend. And then there was just meeting after meeting after meeting between the drivers, between the team principals, between the FIA and everybody at that track about what was going to happen. It went long into the night last night.
Yeah, as you say, Ollie, initially there were plenty of meetings between FP1 and FP2 once it became clear what the situation was. And that situation being that Yemeni terrorists known as the Houthis are the ones that launched that missile, and it got through the Saudi air defenses. Another one, and this was probably less reported, but it did happen on Sunday, just last weekend, while the Bahrain Grand Prix while we were all in Bahrain covering that Grand Prix. And another missile struck the oil refinery, same oil refinery, 11 kilometers away. They managed to do it again, as we know yesterday. As you say, we had these meetings. Stefano Domenicali, the F1 CEO, and new FIA President Mohammed Ben Sulayem, they declared just ahead of FP2 starting, which had been delayed by 15 minutes, that all was fine, we were going to go racing. They'd been given plenty of assurances by the Saudi authorities that all was safe. This circuit was never going to be targeted. Following FP2 and into the drivers' briefing, that whole situation changed. The drivers, amongst themselves, naturally started to air concerns from what we have been told and have been led to believe. Normally, a driver's briefing on a Friday evening discusses things like track safety, certain positions and things around the circuit. Is everything going to be okay? But no, this time round, it completely changed. And as the meeting dragged on, you knew that there was something more to it than just circuit stuff. Then the team principals joined. Then we had Domenicali and F1 Managing Director for Motorsports, Ross Brawn, also in on the action. Then, as I say, the team principals then filter back into it. And over a period of 4.5 hours, and finally at 2 a.m., these meetings finally broke up. We knew that there was something going on. We knew that the drivers were agitated, concerned. We could see that through the glass screens that we were looking into as the media sitting in the paddock while they were having their meeting. And then finally, as you say, the team principals emerged from one last meeting with Stefano Domenicali and the likes of Red Bull team principal Christian Horner, McLaren's CEO Zach Brown. They came out and said, we're going racing. The question we haven't had answered is why? Now, the team principals are due to hold their FIA scheduled press conferences later this afternoon here in Jeddah. So hopefully we will get more answers, because the statement that has just been released, just as you and I came on air to do this, really doesn't say anything. All it confirms is we're going racing. F1 and the FIA has been ensured it's safe. Everybody's fine. Really? All it takes is one stray missile. That's all it takes. And that's the bottom line. And is our safety really the priority here? Well, of course it is, but they can't really totally guarantee our safety, I don't feel.
Well, it's interesting as well, the group that's taken responsibility for the attack on the oil refinery. There has been, I think the phrase that's been used is they're attacking Saudi infrastructure, not civilians. Which, look, in my naivety, maybe, but that's a very nice phrase to use that's convenient to keep F1 going this weekend and keep F1 obviously in the nation of Saudi Arabia and in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and have the big sporting event take place. But at the same time, Formula One is now an integral part of the Saudi infrastructure as well this weekend. You think about the amount of money that is going to be generated from this race being in the kingdom, the amount of attention as well. I mean, it is as big a target, arguably, as an oil refinery anyway, let alone the opportunity for just a stray missile. Believing terrorist groups, again, it's a very interesting and complex situation of buying in, oh, it's fine, they're just attacking the infrastructure rather than individuals. But Formula One, as I say, seems like part of the infrastructure this weekend.
It is an integral part of the infrastructure. And if they really, really wanted to make a statement, however, they really, really wanted to make a statement, yes, they could direct a missile on this circuit. If they have the capacity to fire a targeted strike and hit that directly on the oil refinery, not once, but twice over the past few days, we know that therefore if they really wanted to make a statement, they could target the circuit. However, I will say this, their cause over these past few days, over these past 24 hours, has now been brought into a global spotlight thanks to F1 being here at this particular time. If they wanted that cause to be totally disintegrated, for them to have no sympathy whatsoever with the Saudis with whom they currently have a war with, then the last thing you feel that they would ever do would be to target this circuit. But as I mentioned earlier, we know missiles can go astray. And that's probably the underlying thing in this discussion here, that's all it takes is one rogue missile to not hit its intended target, to land anywhere near this circuit, not forget on the circuit, but anywhere near it, and it's a residential complex, then that would change the entire ball game for this Grand Prix weekend. Fingers crossed, obviously, nothing else happens this weekend, that this Yemeni terrorist group, the Houthis, have got their publicity that you think that they were seeking. So, as I say, let's just hope and pray nothing else goes on and we can get through this weekend. But I tell you what, Ali, come the end of this weekend, there will be a lot of people that cannot get away from this place fast enough and will not be looking forward to coming back in years to come. But that, of course, is another discussion for the F1 and the FIA with the teams and drivers going forward. The bottom line, of course, remember, is there is a lot of money invested in this event. And as usual, with F1, as we well know, money often talks. And it is understood that the drivers, during their meetings, and it was felt that there were a lot of dissenting voices, a number that did not want to go racing, the drivers were ultimately coerced and persuaded that it was not the right thing to do, but the thing that they should do to continue racing this weekend.
It's interesting, though, because, again, we had Sebastian Vettel came out very quickly after the events in Russia. and of course in the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and said, like, I won't race in Sochi straight away. Just blanket statement, that's not going to take place, whether that Grand Prix took place or not before it had obviously been taken off the calendar. It is interesting, though, we're at this point, and you can't compare these two situations at all, but there is such, as you mentioned, an element of danger that the drivers have now been able to be coerced into it. And there is a train of thought of, should Formula One be in Saudi Arabia anyway, with sport washing that has been discussed greatly when it comes to sport in this part of the world. Lewis Hamilton is still quite clearly quite uncomfortable still racing in Saudi Arabia, as he's touched on both last year and this year in his press conference. And then there is a line that's come out about the drivers have been told that maybe Saudi Arabia could make life difficult for Formula One leaving the country if people didn't get on board with racing. And that is something that has happened in the past, I believe, with a WWE event that took place in Saudi Arabia, and the plane was delayed trying to leave the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. It's quite an ugly situation, regardless of whatever happens this weekend, for Formula One to still be involved in this Grand Prix and in events in this place, in this part of the world.
They are the kind of questions, Ollie, you've just brought up there, the points that you've just raised that naturally will be put towards both the team principals and the drivers throughout the course of the day. As I said, the team principals are coming up in just over a couple of hours' time here, just to put a bit of perspective on the time situation. So we know that they're going to be questioned on it. They are going to be asked about why we're racing, about was there any coercion, was there any pressure put on them and the drivers regarding such points as you've mentioned there, that they might have difficulties leaving this country, that the freight that naturally needs to get to Australia quite quickly out of here might be wrapped up in red tape, and then that would then have a knock-on implication for the Australian Grand Prix going ahead if anything like that happened. So these are the main points that everybody wants answers to today. Hopefully we will get them. Hopefully there won't be a cover-up, but you got to feel that we're not going to get those answers, because the last thing they will want to do while they're here is to antagonize the Saudi people, the Saudi authorities, and the backers that are putting in the money to get this race here at this track, which incidentally is going to remain here for another 3 years after this weekend's event. The reason being is that at the present, there is a purpose-built facility in Jeddah being built, but the reason why that's not going to go ahead as quickly as was originally planned is that they want the area around it to have its infrastructure. They don't just want a South Korean mock post situation. If you remember, that race took place down there many years ago. They built a purpose-built circuit down there, but they wanted a whole infrastructure, and it never got off the ground. Here, they want all that in place first. So for the next 3 years after this one, we're still going to be coming to Jeddah, which means that this place could still potentially be targeted for those next 3 years, given this war that's going on between Saudi Arabia and Yemen.
Just finally, Ian, do you think we should be racing here this weekend after everything that's gone on in the last 12 to 24 hours? Do you personally think we should be, as a sport, packing up and heading off and away before getting underway with qualifying later on today?
Well, listen, Ali, I covered the Bahrain situation, as I mentioned earlier, 11 years ago now. Got to remember that 1 year when there was the uprising in the country, that race did get cancelled. But then at that particular time, there was a lot of violence, a lot of political tension going on in the background between the locals and the authorities there. The following year, when we were to go back, I remember there was still a lot of protests, a lot of violence going on in the background. And I actually went out in the field and saw firsthand what was going on. I saw the running pitched battles between police, between the civilians, with smoke grenades and petrol bombs and all that kind of stuff. And there was the feeling then that race should not have gone ahead either. For me, given the proximity of this airstrike, and yes, it might have been targeted on an oil refinery 11 kilometers away, but given the proximity, I think that for the safety of everybody concerned, the Saudi authorities can say preach as much as they like, oh yes, we will guarantee your safety. I've seen no extra additional security coming into this circuit today, which really surprised me. So I think Formula One, the FIA, should really have done the right thing, and the Saudi authorities should have agreed with them on this occasion and vowed to have done more for the years coming up to guarantee that safety. But right here, right now, after that took place on Friday afternoon, while FP1 was taking place, I hasten to add, I don't think that we should be going ahead with this Grand Prix weekend. And I know I'm not alone in that summation as well.
Ian, thank you so much for joining us this morning. I know you're a busy man indeed. Really interested to see what the fallout is, of course, from the team principals press conferences as well. You can follow all of that as well as all of Ian's updates on the live blog throughout this weekend on gpfans.com and at GPFans Global on Twitter and Instagram as well, where we've been retweeting a whole load of Ian's content from his personal account, as well as, of course, our own content as well, to keep you up to date with everything that goes on in Saudi Arabia. I think the most important thing to say, though, Ian, is look, stay safe. Whatever happens this weekend, if we do eventually get round to actually having the Grand Prix on Sunday, stay safe, take care, and look forward to getting you back in the UK, mate.
I'll be doing all that I can. Catch you on Monday for our fans podcast, looking back on this weekend's events.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot to talk about on that one for sure. Take care, mate.